Delegate Drennick, stand clear of the floor. Earth's representative has the right to respond. The chamber's overhead lights flared brighter as the dome's acoustic dampeners lifted, revealing the layered clamor of over 90 species speaking in agitation. The floor beneath the delegates rippled with directional light bands, as if tracking the temperature of tension, each pulse moving like veins through obsidian glass. A heat shimmer rose over the center podium as a Terran figure stepped into view. No escorts, no ceremonial garb, no expression to dissect. Ambassador Vernrock, Earth's last authorized emissary, bore the weight of a vote already decided. Council protocol recognizes Earth's right to object, said Chancellor Exath of the Thulax Dominion, voice rough with satisfaction. His 4 eyelids blinked asynchronously as he gestured toward the tribunal. Rourke didn't speak. He opened a matte gray attaché case, removed a single steel plate engraved with Earth's planetary insignia, and held it level with the Council's eyeline. Earth rejects the Dominion Accord, he said. No condition, no clause, no consent. Gasps. The Verundi speakers stilled. The Ekaran scribes dropped their stylus devices. Even the moisture harvesters embedded in the chamber walls momentarily froze in rhythm. Delegate Jazoro of the Qatari Order leaned forward, talons clicking on the edge of his seat. This is not a negotiation, Terran. It never was, Rourke replied. He placed the plate on the tribunal's ceremonial plinth and pressed a coded imprint beneath it. The lights in his eyes briefly glinted. Not artificial enhancement, just raw human nerve. You refuse the accord knowing what the vote entails? The Dravari arbiter spat, his scaled lower mandibles flexing in disbelief. I don't represent Earth anymore, Rourke said. I represent absence. Then he turned. No flourish, no data parse, no rebuttal. Only exit. The chamber shook. Not from impact, but from the absence of anticipation. The departure was not dramatic, it was surgical. As Rourke boots left the photometric floor, a vacuumed click marked the end of Earth's participation in galactic diplomacy. 3 floors beneath the council chamber, in an unregistered sub-enclave below the ventilation strata, a man watched the feed cut off. He didn't flinch. The room around him was dim, not for mood, but for operational necessity. Thin rows of optic cabling trailed across the ceiling like roots, searching for purpose. The walls breathed, literally flexing, with pulsed oxygen flow recycled every 6 seconds. Sorav Draneth sat on a welded titanium stool, hunched over a reinforced slab table displaying thermotrace packets from the council floor. He didn't need to see Rourke's face. He had written the exit protocol 2 years ago. The plate's been submitted, a calm voice reported. It belonged to Adrax Vor, standing behind a modded comm interface, shielded with a graphene-lined casing. His fingers tapped a rhythm on the control keys, steady, like a man diffusing live ordnance. Vote logs confirm universal ratification, 92 signatures, no abstentions. Draneth nodded once. He reached into his coat and pulled a gray-black keycard etched with asymmetric notches. Project Cinder Authorization Level IV. He slid it into the recessed slot on the operations table. The table lit up with deployment parameters across 6 sectors. Vor didn't ask for confirmation, he knew what came next. Across the solar boundary, a relay beacon tethered above Jupiter's pole blinked red twice, then ceased transmission. One by one, the wormhole access gates linking the outer galactic corridor to Sol's subsystem deactivated. Their crystalline intake rings cracked in controlled self-determination. No energy spikes. No retaliatory signals. Just severed links. On Neptune's orbit line, the Arcturon Trade Embassy emptied itself overnight. Ships that once served as cultural liaisons now accelerated into unmarked vectors, disappearing without any transactional record. Earth was folding in, but not surrendering. Inside a subglacial vault buried beneath the Siberian exclusion zone, long abandoned by surface nations and rendered invisible by electromagnetic camouflage, Dran walked the length of a sealed corridor, illuminated only by narrow pulse floor beams. With each step, the beams changed hue from red to blue, reading his gait, thermal range, and blood signature. He entered the chamber where 3 men stood waiting. Mechlin Gyre didn't turn as Draneth approached. His attention was fixed on a transparent alloy container displaying a compressed deployment node shaped like a mineral core. Dutgard 5, crater scans confirm payload acceptance. Mechlin said, Spore shells under Vanta are stable. Trigger rate is 3 seconds post-pressure collapse. Draneth's reply was brief, not destructive. Mechlin nodded, still not turning. Mutative only. Rewrites oxygen balances on a molecular aggression scale. Atmospheric data will resemble traceable contamination, not active war. The third man, an older operative known as Vorik Thal, closed a data slate with a flick of his knuckle. A Thavari defector, his presence still unsettled the room, but his information was key to the next phase. They'll move in quick, Thal said. You've got about 2 cycles before the first wave commits to system lock. Draneth stepped to the central command unit. The chamber lights adjusted to the retinal feed from his proximity signature. On a non-reflective interface, a constellation of dots appeared. Each one a target. Each one a baited trap. This wasn't about escalation, Draneth said. It was about letting them organize a mistake. The room remained still. He pressed his palm against the launch pad. Multiple subroutines across Sol engaged. Quiet, exacting, irreversible. Back at the Galactic Council, the votes were being tallied in a ceremonial fashion, broadcast across 93 territories, most for symbolic reinforcement. The Dominion Accord's ratification confirmed. Earth was now an excisable species. As the delegates applauded their own decision, the Council's laser inscriber etched the final clause into a crystalline tablet, a formal archive. The engraving tool sparked once, stuttered, then resumed. No one paid it any mind. Beneath the ceremonial platform, the Earth's empty seat remained. Its data slab was gone, its flag folded. A sealed crate bearing Earth's emblem sat in its place, unclaimed. Sorav Draneth stood before the cryo-operations vault and inserted the final phase key. He said nothing. The floor vibrated subtly as underground launch sequences passed beneath them. This wasn't war. This was closure. Next to him, Adrex Vor finally broke the stillness. What's the transmission header? Draneth turned. No broadcast, he said. We let them talk first. Status check. If we missed even one node, we're not preparing, we're exposed. Sorav Draneth's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. His words carried like pressure inside a sealed chamber, forcing the others to stay locked into the moment. No one spoke for the sake of filling time. The chamber they stood in was buried beneath Antarctic crust, deep within an abandoned subseismic monitoring station converted into Cinder Command's forward relay hub. Low-spectrum floor lights illuminated hard concrete seams and condensation lines that hadn't seen natural air in years. The walls gave off a chill not from temperature, but from age and disuse. Cooled by the passage of history no one recorded. Mechlin Gyre knelt by a shielded server casket, his hands gloved in a haptic weave that trembled faintly with calibration pulses. He didn't look up. 7 nodes confirmed, he said. Each syllable clipped as though it had weight. Mercury's orbital shell is seeded. Europa's poles are mapped. Vantacores are embedded across 6 post-abandonment biospheres. Draneth stepped over an old seismic bore plate and peered at the activation panel. The heads-up interface responded, flooding its edge-bound frame with wave-preptor readouts, each flashing green, one after another. There were no backup keys, no second chance once the sequence began. Adrex IV stood at the far end of the chamber, eyes scanning through a retinal-linked tether coil. Zorval Relay scrubbed clean. They ran a deep probe sweep last year. Didn't catch anything. That bluff's still holding. Draneth walked the length of the narrow corridor connecting the relay chamber to the operations nexus. Overhead cables twisted like artificial vines, each bound in dust-slicked insulation. Some blinked faint red markers. Non-audio status. Others had gone dim, intentionally severed. No one commented on the smell. It wasn't rot or chemicals. but the sterile decay of long-isolated electronics. "Fall?" Draneth asked, not raising his voice. The defector emerged from a side alcove flanked by stacked encryption canisters. Vorik Thal wore a threadbare field jacket, unmarked except for a jagged insignia half-burned into the shoulder. The Vari Special Recon, long since disbanded. Their incursion patterns based on a ring-fork formation, Thal said. They'll push in through peripheral systems, then collapse inwards. Their doctrine doesn't allow them to strike at Sol directly without isolating comm-escape vectors first. Raneth looked over at Vor. "What's our mirror sequence?" Vor tapped twice on his wristband. A projection bloomed from his cuff. A lightless node web of deployment zones. The display didn't rely on shine or backlight. It glowed only through filtered ambient refraction, casting no reflection, broadcasting no signal. "Grav frames nested around dormant brown dwarfs," Vor said. "Old survey reports tagged them as spatial hazards. Coalition fleets will skim past them to save time. When they do, mass indexing triggers collapse folds." Thal folded his arms. "How do you get those cores to trigger without drawing heat on deployment?" Mechlin answered without looking up. "Pre-ignition mimicry. They behave like decayed magnetic anomalies until they're triggered by specific starship grav signatures." Draneth gestured toward the table in the center of the room. A heavy black case sat latched, its surface etched with no identifiers. "Open it," he said. Vor knelt, flicked the triple locks and raised the lid. Inside rested 6 capsule shells. Charcoal gray spheres with thin contour lines running along their equators, each marked with micro-triggers calibrated to planetary crust tension. "Vanta payloads," Vor said, not needing to explain further. "Compressed spores, rate calibrated to bloom once oxygen balance is hit with high contact atmosphere. Changes composition, not through detonation." Thal stared at one for a moment, then looked to Draneth. "You mean to strangle the air out of their homeworlds?" "No," Draneth said. "I mean to give them what they gave every planet they claimed. Terms they can't negotiate." There was no reply. No moral debate. Everyone in that room had already lived through the aftermath of accords signed without consent. Each man had buried cities under policies crafted to keep their species compliant. Outside, the magnetic shielding groaned faintly as solar radiation bled across the surface. No alarms, no indicators. Just planetary motion ticking past without notice, unaware of the networks activating beneath its crust. At the far end of Earth's dried Atlantic basin, a deep core insertion drill sparked once, then went quiet. 2 operators wearing plain brown suits unmarked by flag or division shoveled final composite layers back over the casing site. The Vanta device was in place. They left the site on foot, dragging sleds stripped of all power sources. An observation drone embedded in an old relay tower watched them leave, recorded the timestamp, and powered down permanently. No ceremony, no salute. Back inside the relay room, Vor brought up the inbound fleet telemetry. "Coalition Warfleet has cleared Regulus," he said. "They're pushing hard across the Kepler arcs. Looks like they're cutting a shallow angle to save fuel mass. Then they'll miss the fallback satellites we placed near Glisa," Mechlin said. "We should reinforce the bait vector closer to the twin subdwarfs." Draneth nodded. "Swap decoy emissions. Make them look like emergency supply beacons. Scatter humanitarian coding, something the Qatari would chase down." Vor tapped in the sequence. "Done." Thal leaned forward, arms on the table. "You ever think they'll wonder how far back this was planned?" Draneth's reply came without pause. "They won't wonder. They'll realize. And by then, their own supply chains will be mapped for inversion." Outside the bunker, the first tremor ran through the launch field. A movement not felt but registered on microseismic meters embedded under a kilometer of frost. One of Earth's remaining deployment cradles activated with a low-frequency rumble, drawing no attention from orbital scans. Power was rerouted through thermal discharge vents, designed to simulate geothermal turbulence. Inside, Vor looked up, Mercury nodes online. Mechlin gave a tight nod. 6 minutes till first drift shell passes its path. Draneth moved toward the launch initiator panel. He pressed his palm against the ridged surface. A verification thread wrapped around his biometric signature. Bone density, blood oxidation, gait memory. The screen didn't flash or ping. Instead, 3 words appeared in plain text. Phase A1, locked. No sound followed. Route communications to deep burst packet, Draneth ordered. Disperse along atmospheric skip bounce relays. No bounce back. No confirmation needed. Vor obeyed, flipping 3 switches and slamming a final control into place. The panel's light faded. Thal cracked his knuckles. This how you celebrate an execution order? We're not executing, Draneth said, eyes fixed on the terminal. We're erasing the part of the map that assumed we'd beg. He turned to the door leading to the second vault, where targeting sequences for the secondaries were already waiting. Mechlin, you're with me. Vor, stay here and oversee cycle drift sync. Thal, monitor deep scan logs from the old Thavari border outposts. If anything deviates, we don't adapt. We delete. And with that, Draneth stepped through the threshold, the lock behind him sealing with a sub-bass click. Fleet command to all division heads. Earth grid entry commences now. If your formations are not aligned within 9 ticks, you will be bypassed. The broadcast snapped across the interspecies fleet via centralized relays, translated and modulated for all 92 attending empires. A symphony of affirmation codes followed, some audible, others via a neural burst, but the meaning remained consistent. They were converging. From above the Argenti cluster, the Zerval 1st Spear Battalion shifted formation. Each vessel's trajectory updated in tight intervals, responding to ghost signals marked as leftover Terran beacon trails. The lead scout ship, Crestfall Nexus, adjusted thruster direction and fell into an intercept arc toward the dark coordinates. On board, Captain Igron Tal shut his inner eyelids against the screen glow. No heat blooms. They abandoned this sector entirely. Typical prey tactic, running to extinction. His second-in-command, a squat envoy from the Orvani caste, paused beside the overhead readout. Might be worth tagging for mineral salvage, unless the remaining hives have turned feral. Tal nodded once, gesturing to the helmsman. Deploy. Before the order finished transmission, the ship lurched, gravity distorting in erratic pulses. The bridge groaned, lights rupturing in their mounts. The vessel listed sharply left as artificial weight thresholds collapsed. Entire nav paths reversed. From their screens, the gravitational map bent like a snapped tree limb. The Nexus's rear quarter sheared clean off, drifting with violent inertia into a slow spiral. Then vanished, crushed into fragments before crew distress signals could initiate. In the command center of the main Zerval fleet, Admiral Vrex Kral watched the marker blink red, then dissolve. Crestfall Nexus is gone, a technician said, his claws twitching. No enemy contact, no external ordnance, just void drift. Kral narrowed his focus. Was that sector mapped for binary gravwake fields? No, sir, the technician answered. Standard decay pattern, unremarkable orbit. Kral opened the star chart himself. A circular field where the ship had disappeared now flashed with inconsistent mass readings. A moment later, the zone blanked out. Nothing remained. Tag it as unstable, Kral growled. Move wide, no recovery efforts. Across the fleet, formation adjustments rippled outward. Half a system away, the Salvani Vanguard approached the Martian orbital ridge. Their lead destroyer, Valhekron, maintained altitude just above the red stratum, scanning for Terran remnants. Admiral Nosith, adorned in skeletal armor that chimed with each stride, regarded the terrain beneath through a reinforced dome viewplate. There's no resistance, no drones, no trace of communications, he murmured. We anticipated defenses. An aide gestured toward a heads-up display flickering in periphery. There's a void corridor opening by the Europa chain. 6 energy plumes registering subsurface ignition. Nosith tapped the signal into focus. 6 points forming a spiral began moving, not upward, but outward. He watched them trace an invisible perimeter. No heat emission, no visible mass. The trail ended at the orbital edge. A secondary destroyer, Vekla, passed over the same point. The lights in its cabin flared blue for an instant before the vessel's internal compartments collapsed inward like folding paper. No sound escaped. Only data trails vanishing mid-transmission. Within 2 minutes, 5 destroyers were gone. "What kind of weapon was that?" the aide asked, stepping back. "No impact readings, no hull breach signatures, nothing touched them," said a systems officer. Nasith pulled off his interface helm and handed it to the aide without a word. He looked at the planet below. Still barren, still unmoving. "Withdraw from Martian orbit," he ordered. "If they're not firing, it means they've already finished what they started." In the Coalition Central Fleet, located beyond Saturn's rings, a High Council broadcast opened through secure feeds. The Council members appeared in staggered formation, some from crystalline chambers, others encased in nutrient tanks or neural exohubs. All stared at the primary fleet feed, showing the Zerval and Solvani casualties. "No contact, no battles," said Chancellor Olvareth of the Quarrel Dominion. "This was supposed to be a demonstration. Instead, we're losing ships to terrain." A Varundi strategist leaned in, his twin hearts audibly thudding in sync. "If they've mined gravity itself, we may not be dealing with classic defense lines." A ripple passed through the network, lines distorting as updated star maps loaded. Each new image had redacted zones, chunks of space blanked out and tagged inaccessible, sensor anomaly. Some were corridors, others full systems. All were within Terran reach. "What are we seeing?" asked a Thavari signal tactician. "Manipulated charts," one of the AI support modules answered. "Terran interference patterns across all previous scout data. They didn't block access. They corrupted the assumption of safety. Aerith baited us into cutting our own throat," Ulfred muttered. Meanwhile, on board Earth's Deep Crust Command Center, Mechlin Gyre stood beside a fiber-braced coordination hub. The walls ticked with thermionic pings as counterchronals syncopated to match the enemy fleet delays. Adrax Vor entered, holding a stack of printout reels. Zerval lost 3 heavy cruisers, no survivors reported. Solvani's main fleet disabled one of their own while trying to reverse thrust from Europa's crust zone. "We didn't touch them. They broke on shadows." Draenith stepped from a rear corridor, face unreadable. "Phase 1 has already exceeded required metrics." Vor flicked through more data. "Coalition comms patterns show tactical corrections. Some captains are executing split formations to avoid matching star lanes." "That's not adaptation," Draenith replied. "That's disorder." He moved to the heads-up interface, eyes scanning the waveform data. "Begin uplink to Thal. Tell him we'll need his next batch of corridor deception points in less than 6 hours. Push them toward the inner band of the Thavari loop." Vor nodded, already entering the request. In the Coalition's lead flagship, the Thavari Admiralty assembled behind a reinforced Terran shield overlooking the Armada. General Ixis, of the Rune Front, leaned over his plotting array, antennae twitching. "They're not engaging us. Not even responding." Admiral Favik answered without facing him. "That's the strategy. They won't give us battle. They'll just keep watching." Ixis snarled. "Cowardice masked as doctrine." "No," Favik replied, finally turning, eyes hard. "This is no doctrine. This is preparation done so well we weren't needed in the plan. We were invited to lose." Outside, one of their cruisers veered slightly off course, then simply failed to adjust. Its entire navigation route had been recalculated by Earth's old relay codes. Codes that now broadcast false gravitational inputs. The ship vanished behind the Saturnal field with no retrieval attempt logged. No debris, no calls, no threats. Just disappearance, confirmed Thavari atmospheric drift. Payload ignition window opens in 6 seconds. Atrax Vor's voice reached through the bunker with flat finality. He didn't look up from the mineral density scanner built into the center console. The air was cold, dry, and carried the bite of recycled carbon, not synthetic, but remnants of filtered air passed through reinforced sediment cores. Sorav Droneth stood with his arms folded behind his back, boots planted beside a thermal cable channel threading into the deck. "Telemetry reads nominal," Mecklenjire replied, fingers dancing across the input cradle. "Pressure levels are within the reactive band. If their biosphere regulators don't compensate in 30 seconds, they lose breathable layers across all latitudes." "Hold ignition," Droneth said. "Let them feel secure." They waited. Above, embedded between the upper layers of the asteroid belt, a dormant node coded as Vanticore 3 adjusted its posture via microthrust. The spore payload inside wasn't explosive. It was adaptive. Encased in crystalline filament, it mimicked dormant volcanic gases, inert until exposure to specific alien biomolecules keyed from genetic recon. The Vari Prime's capital, Jun Ketra, stood as the tallest vertical city in the outer colonies. Stacked architecture, spiraling through their lower cloud bands, pulsed with ambient light circuits now cycling through their morning rise protocol. Streets brimmed with march banners, celebrations of planetary annexation success. The Dominion Accord flags flapped above ceremonial arches, while sky barges skimmed their paths in tight formation. In the district of Siltrenek, Commander Var Lakos stepped onto the observation platform flanked by honor guards. Below him, over 200,000 citizens chanted in ritual formation. A heads-up display shimmered on the rail before him. Plotting the day's troop mobilization exercises. "Begin national broadcast," Lakos ordered. "Let them see what order looks like." He never saw the color of the sky change. From the west quadrant, the haze started thin, just a slight distortion in the upper layers. Weather sensors flagged a minor particulate inconsistency. Automated drones passed through the field and failed to return. Ground-level oxygen ratios altered by 0.3%, barely noticeable. Within minutes, that figure tripled. People began coughing, not from infection, but suffocation. Lakos turned to his guard. "Lock district gates, seal residential towers." He didn't see the frost forming across the hulls of parked transports. It wasn't ice. It was Vanta bloom. A blackened dust crystallizing on contact with surface materials, rewiring atmospheric processors at the intake valves. Within 15 minutes, the oxygenation cycles dropped by 50%. The sky turned amber. At ground zero, a boy collapsed mid-step, mouth wide open, eyes unfocused. No wounds, no cries. Just the slow failure of conversion gases needed to process air into something livable. Emergency shelters activated, doors sealed. Internal scrubbers fired at full rotation. They failed. The Vantaspores had already passed through ceramic intakes days ago. Waiting. Lakos triggered an encrypted beacon from his command badge. "This is Prime District. Atmospheric conditions are failing. We need containment." No answer came. Not from the Planetary Emergency Network, not from Orbital Fleet Command. The comms arrays weren't down. They were feeding back corrupted routing instructions, written in ancient Terran programming protocols. What they received was a message stripped of context. "Response to new Captain Kaiser. Not recognized." Back inside Earth's relay chamber, Vor watched the data trail collapse. "That's 3 rings down," he said. "No external force applied. The air turned against them." McClone loaded the next node sequence, activating the core's decay timer. "They'll try to quarantine," he said. "Won't matter. The spores adjust to their sealing materials." Duraneth approached the tactical board. "What's the signal spread?" 17 worlds reporting abnormalities," Vor answered. "Outbreak symptoms follow predicted vectors. Subtle at first, then progressive drop-offs in respiration viability." "Do they know it's us?" Duraneth asked. Vor hesitated. "Not yet. Most assume malfunction, a few are blaming internal sabotage." "Good. Let them fracture." In a shadowed observation wing beneath Earth's eastern trench line, Vorikthal sat alone, earpiece embedded in his jaw, eyes locked to a narrowband transmission channel still feeding from the Thavari capital. Cries poured in now, not desperate but stunned. Entire street sections trying to scale airlock walls. Shelters rejecting citizens. Military drones firing tear dispersal rounds at their own civilians. Confused by no clearance orders misaligned with current authority keys. He heard his brother's voice, Captain Thuran Thal, calling for evacuation lanes that weren't opening. We can't breathe, the air won't bind, the clouds crawling inside the vents. Vorik sat motionless. He'd warned them. Years ago, before defecting, he'd begged his family to leave their posts, find a neutral orbit, disappear before the retribution started. They hadn't listened. The feed cracked. He caught one last phrase. They weren't. DEA didn't bomb us, they rewrote the planet. The channel terminated. On Earth's upper deck, McLean reached across the control spine and keyed the asteroid deployment field into standby. Fail-safe at Node 11 tripped. We've got a flagged cascade forming near the outbound Vantaris corridor. Grenath moved to his position. Shut it down? McLean shook his head. Let it run. It's within acceptable fallout. Ford turned from the analytic wall, holding up a feed strip. Collected over 40 worlds' fear patterns. They're beginning to code it, trying to define what's happening. Every model they run turns up the same core variable. Earth. Grenath read the waveform. It wasn't just data. It was behavioral trend collapse. Mistrust. Internal suspicion. Preemptive isolation. Worlds had started blocking their own orbital ports in case the atmosphere couldn't be trusted. Send the patterns to the outer system relay, Grenath said. Let them spiral. McLean, link the decay to variable solar trigger. Every orbit that passes a Terran dead zone will begin atmospheric disruption within 24 cycles. No attack, just consequence. And Fall? Vor asked. Grenath glanced toward the lower hall. Leave him. The chamber lights dimmed as the power grid rebalanced. One final feed showed the capital towers of Thavari Prime, their lights flickering, not from damage, but from systems no longer compatible with their air. No explosions, no combat, just a species collapsing under the illusion that they were in control. They're not answering. Check the relay again. They're not ignoring us. There's nothing coming back. Zerval Defense Core 7, tucked inside a gravity-negralized bunker beneath the outer ring of Zethra City, buzzed with irregular movement. Crew officers leapt from station to station, heads-up displays fractured by raw signal loss. Emergency tapestries unrolled from the ceiling vents, showing planetary lockdown symbols, usually reserved for meteorological catastrophe. This time, the skies were clear, but every broadcast channel reported oxygen variance anomalies from unrelated hemispheres. Director Halvek clawed the data feed off its cradle, the insulated film peeling like dried skin. How many systems are experiencing failures? A technician didn't answer. His lips parted as he stared at the sensor drift, breath catching in a room that hadn't lost pressure. Not yet. It wasn't the air. It was what the readings meant. Run a live asset check. Where are our ships? Halvek barked. Laser line data flashed over the heads-up interface. Fleet Omega was rerouting. Command Theta had collapsed. The remaining strike groups had shifted vector toward the Zerval edge belt. Unauthorized. They're retreating, one of the aides said, voice cracking. They're breaking formation. On whose orders? Halvek demanded. Not ours. On Thavari Prime, what remained of the planetary broadcast center still functioned in reduced capacity. Inside, technicians monitored footage of collapsed air towers. The black frost still hadn't melted. No pathogen detected, but lungs filled slower. Cries for evacuation still hit the comms room on loop, garbled by misrouted transit overlays. The station's lead operator replayed the incoming transmission from a Thavari orbital station that never re-entered the atmosphere. The bridge. Command disqualified. Host designation. Irrelevant. Invenipol permission revoked. Words printed in Terran syntax. He tried to respond. No path returned. Across the fractured remains of Coalition order space, intercepted logs, extracted by Earth's deep relay intelligence spiders, played across private terminals in a deep layer below Earth's Arctic command. Encrypted entry 122 core. Source, Zerval Civil Archive. Level 4 clearance, internal only. Sectors 11 through 19 are being evacuated. Civilian sectors riot. Youth formations are tearing down indoctrination towers. Military personnel have ceased local enforcement. We believe Terran interference is not physical, but conceptual. They are teaching us to distrust our own air. End record. Mecklen-Jyer adjusted the playback speed, reducing visual lag. Adrax 4 cataloged each disruption pattern into predictive collapse algorithms. Earth had not delivered any threats, and yet 47 sectors had initiated strategic withdrawal. Durant observed without speaking. Not because he lacked response, because the reaction was already modeled. Collapse came not when the first blade fell, but when people realized they no longer understood the shape of the battlefield. Inject false distress beacons through the Tharn relay, Dreneth instructed. Target the fringe sectors that haven't seen failure yet. Give them warning signs, not casualties. 4 nodded. They'll implode on paranoia. In the Euroni Confederation's third-tier cargo hold, a dead cargo technician slumped near an airlock. On the wall behind him, streaked in coagulated blood, was a Terran crest. Etched not as vandalism, but warning. The floor sensor replayed the last footage logged through its internal buffer. The technician had drawn the symbol after overriding emergency bulkhead access, then collapsed. The ship's captain, Zel Travani, stood over the recording with a knot forming in his mid-thorax chamber. The internal gravity sensor was still functioning. Environmental controls read normal. No breach, no toxin, no force entry, the security officer confirmed. He just stopped believing we were safe. Burn that wall, Travani ordered. At a central galactic monitoring station buried beneath Arathian Control Ring 5, the High Council of 6 species convened under deteriorating infrastructure. Heads-up panels flickered with disrupted command cues and overlapping distress icons. Councillor Vixmall opened a strand link, routing his message to the last coalition channel still pinging back response. Why is Earth not responding? We've issued 10 coordinated transmissions requesting terms. A reply came through. Automated. 1 line. Transmission declined. Response not required. He leaned back, talons twitching. They're not even negotiating. No, said Councillor Eros of the Lyran Pact. They are not engaging. That's worse. They don't want victory, said the Gisari delegate. They want narrative. We are the story they've already written. The chamber darkened again as another sensor relay failed. 5 more outer colonies dropped their transponder tags simultaneously. Brixmall ripped the insignia from his robe and threw it onto the floor. We underestimated them by assigning motive. They're not retaliating, they're revising. Zerval's databanks, once protected by 7 rotating firewalls, were overrun by their own citizens. Riots spilled into the government storage annex. Crates of Terran weapons once kept as trophies were dragged out, broken, burned, thrown into the streets. Military commanders ordered troops to restore order. The troops refused. Many had family in the blackout zones. Others had lost contact with orbital crew still unaccounted for. Some had simply decided no uniform could explain why the sky no longer registered their biosignals. Civilian mobs stormed the Ministry of Movement. Data cores were smashed with blunt tools. Cracked laser displays showed warning signs flickering, some misspelled, all corrupted. A local graffiti tag, sprayed along the outer perimeter walls, summed up the new doctrine now taking hold. We breathed confidence. They took the air. In Earth's command interior, Vor displayed the new pattern overlays across a curved heads-up projection. We've reached 52 confirmed system collapses. Tavari and Zerval networks are imploding under citizen disobedience. Fleet orders are being reversed without authorizers. They've stopped trying to act as one. Graneth studied the segmented rings of fractured command sequences. No species with fractured internal chain of command will continue a planetary offensive, Vor continued. Even the Qatari elite forces are requesting unilateral recall. They're asking each other if Earth actually attacked anyone at all. That's the message? Geranth said. We didn't invade. We didn't retaliate. We rewrote the behavior model. And we still haven't said a word, Meklon added. Drenneth turned to him. Let the panic finish writing the first chapter. You gave them access. The words dropped like broken teeth onto the tribunal floor, echoed by the stillness of the chamber. The Thavari in chains, former Admiral Vaskir Bren, didn't flinch. His eye implants blinked in unsynced loops, forced into diagnostic mode by tribunal override. One of them flickered, then dimmed completely. You were seen meeting Vorik Thal 4 cycles before Earth withdrew. Explain it. I met with our own liaison officer. That is not a confession. Counselor Vecht slammed a claw against the data podium. He wasn't ours. He hasn't been for years. And you shared atmospheric relay data outside protocol. I was ordered to confirm breach corridors. Bren snapped. You signed that command yourself. The chamber held its breath. Then Vecht tapped a concealed button on the underside of the table. A nearby wall recess hissed open. Inside rested a tray with 3 biolenses, each one torn from an accused officer during interrogation. Their retina tags had been burned off. Nothing remained to identify them. The verdict didn't need a vote. Minutes later, across a sector-bound transmission log, the phrase Vaskir cleared vanished from the fleet manifest. His cruiser detonated internally before reaching departure sequence. 3 more executions followed, each tied to unexplained routing leaks. None of them showed conclusive proof of defection. It didn't matter anymore. Every unexplained failure traced back to a name no one could pin down fast enough. Though, aboard Earth's subterranean relay chamber, Meklon Gyre sat inside a fiber-strapped control alcove surrounded by rows of synchronized signal readers. He counted down the relay collapses. 10 in total. All tagged for remote cancellation using access keys embedded in Dominion-era fleet templates. Each shutdown triggered a drop in the target system's commneat, but not one signal blast originated from Earth. The deactivations were internal, executed using logic loops seeded years earlier by Fall when he posed as a delegate liaison. Zerval just lost 4 cross-sector relays, Vor said from across the room. Their response tracking shows internal access breach by their own AI. No override? Drenneth asked, entering from the side. None. Keys were embedded too deep, Vor replied. Thal gave us the targeting conditions and timing pulses. They're triggering themselves. Drenneth stepped to the center of the operations platform. The heads-up display shifted to a grid showing signal trails flickering out system by system. There were no warheads, no transmissions, just networks dying on command. He turned toward the inner corridor. Where is he? Secondary vault, Meklon said. Sitting alone since the broadcast, Drenneth left without further instruction. In the vault below, Vorik Thal sat facing a lightless screen. Not powered down, shielded from input. His hands were clasped, knuckles lined with faint indentations from pressure sinker cuffs worn during his early debriefing days. The jacket he wore was Terran issue now. His old Thavari crest had been scorched clean. Drenneth entered without announcement. You know they'll never stop looking for you now, Drenneth said. Cole didn't look away from the dark screen. They already found me. Their way of looking ends with burial. Drenneth paced behind him once, then stopped. The last 10 relays collapsed without trace. The data you gave us. None of it failed. I knew they wouldn't change protocols. Fear breeds ritual. That's the only reliable part of command. 3 species executed their own officers this morning, Drenneth said flatly. No evidence, just the wrong association. Thal finally turned. Then it worked. They're doing our sabotage for us. He stood, knees creaking from the cold steel bench. You need the last access codes, he said. Drenneth gestured to the wall. A narrow drawer opened beside the fiber array. Inside was a burner device, fingerprint locked. Thal placed his palm on it. A strand of green light traced across his skin. The drawer snapped shut. They'll lose contact with the outer fleet within 1 cycle, Thal added. Once those links break, Local planetary control will default to autonomous panic governance. Granith didn't nod. He didn't offer thanks. What do you want to do when it's over? He asked instead. Fall's gaze dropped toward the floor. I used to think I'd go back and explain it to them. Now I know. There's nothing left to explain. Just terms they'll never accept. You won't be sent out again, Granith said. You're flagged too deep. I figured. Granith started to leave. Commander, Thal said suddenly, do you believe they still think this is about revenge? Durant paused at the door. Some might, the rest are too afraid to guess. Then he was gone. In the Verundi Order's interspecies diplomatic center, a burst of encrypted traffic arrived, marked by Earth's outdated delegation code. An old transmission key never officially revoked. It didn't include threats. It didn't request anything. It simply embedded a routing override, one that redirected the Order's public info lattice toward false troop positions. The error spread in seconds, infecting their entire border security map. Dozens of scout ships were dispatched to the wrong sector, chasing phantom energy signatures Earth had never emitted. The Council scrambled to fix it, too late. By the time they restored the master chart, the outer gate had shut down. On board a Gasari command cruiser, Admiral Irvint threw his identification badge onto the floor. His entire Second Fleet had failed to respond after engaging a Terran beacon trap seated inside an abandoned trade station. Every comm route they'd used had been logged in Old Dominion archive keys. Exactly the ones Earth had once protested. His lead officer entered, stepping carefully over loose floor plates. 3 officers have been detained on suspicion of Terran contact, the officer said. One was found trying to access navigational history from the Earth blackout period. Execute them? Irvint asked without emotion. The officer hesitated. One of them is my brother. Then make sure it's clean. Inside Earth's relay command, Mechlin uploaded the final batch of null navigating pings. Each packet carried a command to disrupt internal timestamp validations used by Tavari and Verundi ships. The result? Automated error floods. Crew unable to navigate. Artificial navigation cores switching off mid-route. Logics unable to differentiate between false data and censor truth. No fire, Mechlin said. No light, Vor added. No enemy, Draneth finished. Only questions. And Earth never answered any. Mark the grid. Lock every relay that pings back within 5 cycles. Mechlin's fingers moved quickly, sleeves drawn tight as he stood over the data fork. Fiber junctions fed from 3 stacked nodes, each humming with thermal shift. The feed lines didn't pulse. They froze mid-packet. That was the indicator. Not light. Stillness of function. Systems weren't failing. They were obeying instructions designed to mimic failure perfectly. Across Earth's subterranean command ring, the console screens realigned. Thousands of blinking coordinates, compressing into grayed-out rectangles. No alarms, no warheads, no mess. The final sequence was clinical. Droneth stood motionless at the operations plateau, observing the laser-traced paths connecting every system affected by the Terran architecture. All original routes had been seeded with correction vectors years earlier. Fake diagnostics, false redundancies, subtle interlinks routed through forgotten colonial interface hubs. Every line drawn on the Coalition's master charts had already been mirrored underground. One by one, the outer systems began to vanish, not physically but administratively. In the Galvorith Belt, 9 planets failed to authorize energy transfers to their surface stations. Orbital grid lines, once brightly tethered between satellites and planetary towers, shimmered with disruption and died. Not in fire, not in panic, just absence of authority. In Trelvac City, a towering skyline flickered briefly before descending into systemic blackout. Power cords weren't destroyed. They no longer recognized the control algorithms inputted by the Central Council. Their override tokens had been invalidated by Earth's embedded strings, delivered under the guise of translation protocols 5 years earlier. In the halls of the Zadari Command Council, 3 different species screamed into communications terminals that didn't connect. Their words echoed into null zones, never reaching anyone. The displays didn't flicker or crack, they defaulted to network search screens, as if no other systems had ever existed. Entire military docks powered down in synchronized order. Frigates began to drift in orbital queues. Hangars released their locks automatically and cycled back into emergency hibernation protocols. No explosions followed, no alarms rang. It was not sabotage, it was administrative suicide, carried out by trusting Earth's contribution to their infrastructure. The Karen Assembly's inner chamber locked from the inside. Floor lights beneath their seats blinked once, then dimmed entirely. Doors refused to open. Climate regulators failed, not from combustion but due to timestamp mismatches in their operation firmware. Modified by Earth and never audited again, ships that relied on planetary signal boosts for safe hypershift initiation began miscalculating departure intervals. AI cores halted mid-cycle, unsure whether they'd just completed their navigation algorithm or hadn't started yet. Auto systems required verification pings. None arrived. Launch was impossible. The skies above 9 homeworlds turned gray. Not from weather, but from atmospheric shielding going inert. The skies stayed visible, but the power to protect them had been made obsolete by data decay, introduced into the Coalition's firmware chain by Project Cinder's Phase 2 4 years earlier. No lasers, no kinetic shells, no troop movement, just nullification. Back at Earth's core command, Meklon reached for the Strandlink verifier. Phase finality progressing. 80% of the grid has failed internal validation. 4 more systems self-locked due to rollback confusion. Not a single activation detected from the retaliatory cache. Vor slid a log packet across the feed rail. One of the Zerval outer colonies just requested neutrality with the Thavari, not Earth, with each other. Draneth adjusted the observation radius. The stars on the galactic overlay no longer glowed with data. They were dim, not absent, just not responding. That was the difference. Earth hadn't erased the systems. It had made them incompatible with the rules they'd written for themselves. Civilians? Draneth asked. Still active, Meklon said. No interference with life support or core functions, but governments can't power guidance beacons. Emergency transport routes are routing themselves into dead loops. They'll think it's technical, Vor added. Until they realize every backup responds to our failover key, Meklon said. Draneth didn't speak. He raised one hand. A terminal beside him lit up with the return signal of a Terran probe. A black dart-shaped relay unit last seen disappearing into the Alvin Rift 2 cycles prior. It now re-entered broadcast range, gently gliding through the fragmented edge of Coalition space. Its signal was narrow, one little text. The message wasn't sent. It was just displayed. All pathways end here. The probe made no movement toward engagement. Its course was straight. It carried no payload. Its velocity didn't fluctuate. It simply existed. And in doing so, reminded every system watching that Earth had returned not to speak, but to stop others from continuing. In the Thavari observatory grid, an orbital tech tried to ping a satellite relay. His screen showed the Terran crests ranched, darkened by wear. It wasn't a warning. It was proof. In Goreth 9's floating cities, entire air docks deactivated their platform links, not due to sabotage, but firmware contradiction. The safety systems used Earth standard OM coding. Every ship they now relied on couldn't recognize its host. On Verundi Core, a Coalition commander attempted a system restart. His hands trembled. The central display offered no command line. Only a clock, counting down, not to an attack, to expiration. Meklon tapped 3 keys. All tether points secured, phase finality complete. Draneth looked at the map. The stars remained, but none of them worked anymore. Projector grid online, all sectors green, signal confirmed in 78 populated zones. The technician's voice came without ceremony. No urgency, no celebration, just a procedural update on an operation that had already succeeded before it began. Earth's command node, buried beneath 20 meters of reinforced stone, was quiet, but not waiting. There was nothing left to deploy, nothing left to detonate, only the message. Draneth entered the chamber wearing his original Cinder command coat, scorched around the collar, sleeves worn from years of deployment, not symbolism. The Earth crest on the back was faint, its edges burned from the Stuttgart breach 15 years earlier. He didn't stand on a dais. He didn't demand attention. He stepped into the transmission ring as if it were another corridor. Mecklen's hand hovered over the initiation control. Draneth nodded once. Send it. The grid activated. Across the scattered remnants of the Galactic Coalition, broken relay towers blinked awake. Heads-up displays that had shown only error codes, now lit with sharp clarity. Entire cities, still dark from phase finality, flared back to operational status, just long enough to display a single signal. No carrier fleet followed it. No follow-up commands trailed behind. Only one transmission played. Commander Soreth Draneth stood, alone, within the old galactic chamber on Verdanus Prime. The image wasn't a recording. It was live. No echo. No augmentation. Just presence. Delegates across the remaining seats stared, some in disbelief, some in resignation. Those who still wore robes of office gripped their garments without speaking. The room around him was scarred. Sections burned out from civil unrest, decorative banners long removed. But at the center, the Terran seat stood intact, unoccupied. Draneth looked at it once, then turned to face the delegates. You tried to erase a species. You signed the order with protocol, dressed it in doctrine, handed it to bureaucrats and diplomats. And you thought that made it clean. No one interrupted. No one could. The signal was override locked. You believed Earth was reactive. You assumed anger would drive us to lash out. You mistook our restraint for weakness, and our silence for a lack of options. He stepped forward. You underestimated what memory costs a species that was built in fire, buried in collapse, and resurrected by necessity. He let that sit. The breath between thoughts hung in the air, not for drama, but for accuracy. You were never our enemy, your systems were. Your trust and control, your worship of scale. You built everything around the assumption that numbers define truth. He raised one hand. Across all connected systems, every transmission ring flickered, then broadcast the Earth crest, scorched and incomplete, across every active terminal. Then he spoke the only line Earth had prepared. We were never outnumbered. You just overcounted yourselves. The feed held that frame. No loop, no expansion. Just one line repeated through tens of billions of screens, then ended. On Euroni Prime, civilians dropped to their knees, not in surrender, but from realization. Their orbital lattice had come online for 30 seconds during the broadcast. Then it went dead again. Not destroyed, disqualified. On Zval's capital moon, the council chamber went black after the message ended. No exit doors responded. An emergency light glowed above one wall panel, only to reveal graffiti scrawled inside by a technician 3 hours earlier. Terrans don't strike, they withdraw gravity. At the Thavari Deep Command Vault, Chancellor Virkalen fell back in his seat. He was one of the last to survive the structural grid failure. His aides were gone, his fleet was disconnected. He stared at the flickering icon of Earth's burned crest and whispered a word none of his kin would understand. Final. Back on Earth, Mecklen ran a final systems diagnostic. All operatives accounted for, no further transmissions pending. Feedback threads holding across all collapsed systems. Bohr entered the command core. Coalition is attempting to re-establish quorum protocols using decentralized vote nodes. No one's responding. They're not sure which governments still exist. Draneth didn't turn to them. He stood at the edge of the control ring, watching the final incoming signal die out. Not from interference, from lack of participants. Began recall, he said. Alteran agents? Vor asked. Vraneth looked at him. We've made our point. Let them decide how long they want to remember it. Within 23 hours, no more Earth activity could be detected in any system. Coalition ships, even those still functional, stopped receiving pings from fallback relays. Entire diplomatic channels shut down, not because Earth had jammed them, but because their recipients began to doubt the usefulness of speaking into a network Earth had built. The probe that carried Earth's last message drifted on, engines dormant, signal off. The seat in the galactic chamber, still blank, was left untouched. No one dared remove it.